And welcome back to the Wellness Paradox podcast. I'm so grateful that you can join us on this journey towards greater human flourishing. As always, I'm your host, Michael Stack, an exercise physiologist by training and a health entrepreneur and a health educator by trade. And I'm fascinated by a phenomenon I call the wellness paradox. This paradox, as I view it, is the trust, interaction, and communication gap between allied health and medical professionals and fitness and wellness professionals. This podcast is all about closing off that gap by disseminating the latest, most evidence-based, and most engaging information in the health sciences. And to do that today in episode 34, I'm joined by Luke Carlson from Discover Strength. Now, Luke runs a strength-based boutique fitness company, but this discussion today is going to be on leadership. And leaders aren't born, as I think the common adage would suggest. Leaders are nurtured, develop, they evolve, and they grow. And this discussion is around that evolution and a mental model and then an operational framework of how to become an effective leader. And if there was ever a time for effective and really impactful leadership in the fitness and wellness industry, it's right now as we come out of COVID. We need those strong leaders to steward our industry to where it's going next and to lead our organizations to improve overall public health. And that's what we're going to talk about in this conversation with Luke. Any additional information that we're looking to share from this episode can be found on the show notes page by going to wellnessparadoxpod.com/episode 34. Please enjoy this conversation with Luke Carlson. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Luke Carlson. Luke, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have this discussion with Luke. I actually heard Luke speak down at the Medical Fitness Association conference down in San Antonio in October. And it was a great discussion around leadership. And as I was telling Luke before I came on, I'm a little bit of a leadership nerd myself. And I found his talk not only inspiring, but also very important given the business and political climate we're in right now. We need strong leaders. And before we dive into the conversation on leadership, Luke, why don't you give us a little bit more of an idea of your background just to provide some context for our discussion?
Of course, Michael, thank you for having me. I'm the CEO and the founder of Discover Strength. So we're a chain of boutique fitness studios that really focus on resistance training. We've been around for 16 years. That's my focus. I've been involved in strength and conditioning my whole life. I was a former NFL strength and conditioning coach. So everything related to resistance training and the health benefits of resistance training, that's my passion. I went to the University of Minnesota as an undergraduate in kinesiology. I did a master's in exercise physiology at the University of Minnesota. I studied strategy and innovation at Stanford Business School in a program there and in their executive leadership program. And I have an honorary PhD from Solent University in Southampton, which is about an hour outside of London. So that's the cliff notes on my background.
Yeah, love it. And I feel like we could also get into a great conversation about strength training. I'm going to have to resist my temptation to go to my probably stronger passion than leadership in this conversation, but talk a little bit more on Discover Strength. It's just to touch on the business model for a second. I love a business model in the contemporary fitness industry that's not based around circuit training. With all due respect to circuit training, I think it's great, but strength is a very, very important physical capacity to possess. Just touch on Discover Strength real quick.
Yeah, so I was influenced a long time ago by Jim Collins. Jim Collins became really noteworthy when he wrote Built to Last and Good to Great. And what those books were is they were essentially research projects on how come some companies are great for 100 years and other companies are great for 25 years and then they fade away. What are the common factors of the companies that are successful for 100 years? And the reason his research was so interesting, or frankly, so different, was that he used a matched pair design. So he looked at companies in the same industries, the same time period, the same economic climate, facing the same challenges. Some prevailed and some didn't. So that book was called Built to Last. His other book that he really became famous for was Good to Great. How come some companies are mediocre? They're pretty darn good for a period of time. And then some companies in the same climate, in the same industries, they make a leap to becoming great and they sustain that greatness. And he called that book Good to Great. And one of the things that he writes about is what he calls the hedgehog principle, the hedgehog concept. And it's just 3 questions. So the question number 1 is, what are you passionate about? So I answered that question in a Starbucks in 2004. What am I passionate about? And the answer was easy. It was strength training, resistance exercise. Well, the second question is, what drives your economic engine? Doesn't really matter if you're passionate about it if you can't build an economic model around it where someone would actually give you money in exchange for whatever that passion was. And then the third question is, what could you be the best in the world at? Mm-hmm. And when he asked that question, it's not a motivational or rhetorical question. He would say, if you can't be number 1 or number 2 in the category, you got to change the category. You generally have to narrow the category. And when I read that, I was sitting in a Starbucks and I had just flown home from the largest, most profitable health club in the world, which happens to be in Gainesville, Florida. And so I thought, well, I know I can't open a health club because I can't be number 1 in that category because I just saw number 1 in that category. And frankly, that wasn't my passion. I wasn't passionate about health clubs. Health clubs have resistance exercise, which I am passionate about, and 7,000 other things. Mm-hmm. I'm not interested in childcare centers and cafes and massive locker rooms and aquatic centers and all of it. I love the idea of a health club, but that's not where my real passion was. My passion was resistance exercise. So it's the intersection of those 3 circles that is really what Collins would call your hedgehog concept. And if you just focused on that, well, that was the best way to grow a really profitable firm. And I thought, well, I don't know anything about growing a profitable firm, but this fits with who I am. I know what I'm passionate about. I know how we can actually make money off it. And I think we could be number 1 or number 2 in the world at this because no one was focusing on just this. Mm-hmm. In 2003, 2004, what did we all do? We went to the gym, we went to the health club to work out. Now in 2021, we've seen segmentation or specialization of the market. And that occurs in every market, right? Now, if you want, I'm in Minneapolis as we record this. This is my home. But a week ago, I was in Boulder. And I was apparently everything happens at Starbucks. I was at Starbucks in Boulder. And within the same strip center, I mean, we're talking a 40-yard walk. There was a stretching boutique concept where they just stretched. There was an F45 concept, which is kind of like a group exercise, small group exercise concept. And there was an Orange Theory fitness concept, another small group concept. And I thought, wow, if you have differentiation and you really understand what your concept is all about, we can have a heck of a lot more concepts out there. And so for us, we were a little bit early to that idea of specialization. But it wasn't because I saw around the corner and really understood the future. It's just because I was passionate about strength training. Now, today in 2021, like I said, we have concepts that are just spin and just bar class and just yoga and just boot camp and on and on and on. Now, fortunately, from a business standpoint, there really hasn't been a player that stepped up and said, we're going to just do strength training and do it well. So we think we're appropriately positioned to do that. It just happens to be that that's also my passion. That's all I've ever really wanted to do. Now, side note, any concept that specializes, it doesn't mean you don't think that other things matter. It just means that your business is not going to provide them. So the best orthopedic surgeon in a given market can't replace your aortic valve, right? They're both doctors, they're both surgeons, but we understand in medicine, there's specialists. We're finally getting to that point in exercise. We see it in every other industry. We see it in retail, right? You walk into a running shoe store to buy your running shoes to run your upcoming marathon rather than going to Macy's because they live and breathe it. It's their specialty. And brands become known for that. We think about like Victoria's Secret. They sell, ultimately 2 things, bras and underwear. And every other department store also sells bras and underwear, but we go to Victoria's Secret because that's what they're known for. That's all that they do. And so that's Discover Strength's foundation is we wanted to understand what do we really want to be known for, and we want to focus just on that. Now, it's important to note from a business standpoint, that is the single most effective way to grow a business is to understand what do you want to be known for and just do that. The strength of a brand is inversely proportionate to the scope of the brand. So the more you do, the weaker the brand becomes. Now, it helps in this case that I'm just not interested in that much more outside of strength training. I happen to be an avid marathon runner myself. We don't include any of that in the business because that's not what our real strategic niche, our hedgehog concept is.
That's great. I think to abstract two really important principles from that for the audience. One, I'd hope a bunch of fitness and wellness professionals that are listening to this can relate to the principle of specificity, because we talk about it all the time with exercise, and you've just applied that concept from a business perspective. But one of the things you said very early on that Collins talks about is passion is great, but if you can't make money in it, you don't have a career, you don't have a business, you're not going to help a lot of people. I feel like that's an area where fitness and wellness professionals struggle. They're very passionate, but they struggle to monetize their passion. What's your observation on that?
Totally agree with you. And we can be driven by passion. And let's make an important side note on passion. This is fascinating. We normally think that if you're passionate about something, like we think you came out of the womb passionate about it, and then you'll want to go and learn more about it, right? Well, it's really an inverted relationship. Anything you go and learn more about, your passion will grow. So it's not that passion drives learning, it's that learning drives passion. And for me in my own career, in my own journey, anytime I find myself getting bored with something or lacking passion on a particular topic, whether it's the business or leadership or management or exercise, I got to go read a journal article on it. I got to buy a book on it, and I'm going to go so much deeper on it, and then my passion grows. So if you think as you're deciding how you want to navigate your professional life, you think, well, I don't know if I want to do that. I'm not that passionate about it. My first piece of advice would be go learn more about it. Your passion will grow. So that's just a little bit about passion. So what I think we have to do is we have to understand our passion, but then the question we always have to go back to is, how could I solve a problem for a consumer? Another way to look at it is, how could I provide value for a consumer? We sometimes selfishly think about what am I passionate about, but we don't frame it up as, how does this solve a problem for someone else? How does it provide value for someone else? If you could wire yourself to go through life and think about other people and think about, how could I provide value for them? How can I use my passion and my skills and my expertise and my education to provide value for them? That is how you monetize all of this. So monetizing doesn't make us evil. It ultimately is a great way to measure our overall impact, right? We want to help people. We want to have a huge impact. And I think we ultimately have an impact by creating value for other people. Another way to say that is, how do we solve their problem? How do we match our own passions, our own expertise with problems in the marketplace?
Yeah, that's great. And then fundamentally, this starts to move us towards the primary discussion we're going to have today on leadership. Those are some incredibly valuable business lessons, and they definitely start to build the bridge to leadership. How do we begin to approach this topic of leadership? Like, how do we conceptually frame it up? I say that because a lot of people talk about leadership, or they use examples of leadership, and quite often they're more talking about management or something that isn't leadership. Maybe frame this up for us, for starters, just to level set.
Yeah, so I actually think leadership and management are distinctly different, but I think they both matter. So we've mistakenly in 2021 thought that, well, leadership is just a higher form of management. And frankly, we say things like, people don't want to be managed, they want to be led. So focus on being a great leader. And the reality is, no, we need to be great leaders and we need to be great managers. They are distinctly different. So we can think about this as leadership being working on the business. And if it's not a business, it can be a team, an organization, it can be a nonprofit we're working on. So we're zooming out 30,000 feet and looking down. Management is working in the business. They both matter, right? Leadership is providing clear direction. This is the direction we're going to go. So this is JFK saying, we will put a man on the moon by the end of the decade, right? So we all need that clear direction. What are we trying to build? What's the Everest that we're going to climb, right? That's leadership, clear direction. where management is clear expectations. We know the number one cause of job misery is I don't know what's expected of me when I go to work. And frankly, my boss has different expectations for me than I have for me. We have a mismatch around expectations. If you can get those expectations clear, that is the foundational component of being engaged in the workplace. So that's management, and that matters, clear expectations. So those are a few of kind of our key differences. Leadership is a little bit more thinking. Management is a little bit more doing, but again, they both matter. So I don't think that you could truly be, I'm going to use the term boss. I don't think you can be a great boss, and you might not like that term, but we're going to use that term as a way to combine leadership and management. You truly can't be great in the role unless you understand leadership and management. I think we need to have both.
Yeah, and I completely agree. One follow-up question that comes to mind that I'm curious to get your thoughts on is, can that be the same person? Can a leader be a manager and a manager be a leader? Because in many small fitness businesses, there's not a robust leadership and management team.
Yeah, so what a great question. The answer is yes. And I think we should all strive to be great managers and great leaders. And there's a couple of realities or truths around that. And the first one I think really gets to your question is, or relates to your question is, you don't have to change your style. You don't have to change who you are. So you can be a great leader and a great manager and still be you. So we make the mistake of looking at a leader or a manager that we maybe put on a pedestal or we've seen in the media or we've read about, and we think, well, I have to be like them. I have to be like Steve Jobs. I have to be like fill in the blank. We'll use Brian Kelly because he's just leaving Notre Dame and signing the richest contract in the history of college or professional football. I have to emulate that person. The reality is you can be an introvert, you can be an extrovert. You can be rah-rah, you can be incredibly quiet in your approach. Tony Dungy, as a football coach, was incredibly different than Bill Parcells. They are both incredible coaches. So the first truth is you can be a great manager and leader at the same time and still maintain your own style. And you should maintain your own style because your people will view you as inauthentic if you don't maintain your own style. So we have to move toward mastering the practices of leadership and management while still maintaining and understanding what is my own style. But along with that, I think we have to make sure that we care about people. Like if you don't care about people, neither one is going to work. You can learn leadership and management, but it's got to be rooted in a foundation that you care about people, because that's what we're doing is we are leading and we are managing around people. The work that we do is done through people. We're not doing the work ourselves. It's done through other people. It's getting people on board with our vision, our direction, our expectations. And so we have to have a passion for people. And then I think from fitness professionals, this is my last point, and this is incredibly important, is we have to want to be great as a leader and manager. Most fitness professionals, and this is not just fitness professionals, came up doing the technical work. I mean, you were truly a great personal trainer, but it's no different than other professions. You're truly a great accountant, right? You are truly a great engineer. And then you get thrust into this leadership and management role, and your identity is still as a personal trainer, as the technical work, being that expert. So you have to make a mindset change that no, the job is leadership and management. That's the real calling. And to me, that's the most important calling on earth. I mean, the impact that we can have as fitness professionals is massive. The impact we can have as a leader and manager that develops other leaders and managers, that develops other leaders and managers, this is where we create incredible impact. So I think everyone that moves in that leadership and management role has to say, well, this is the job. This is my life's work. This would be worth it for me to study and immerse myself in the great books and the great work and the speakers and the content around leadership and management.
Yeah, it is a higher calling. And to that end, and you said it, most people that start out as a practitioner, a technician, that's what they're familiar with. And I feel, and just from my own personal experience, I felt very comfortable as a manager because of that. But leadership was a little bit more abstract. It was a little bit more challenging to work on the business than in the business, if nothing else, because working in the business, you see the tangible results of what you're doing every day. Working on the business, and you know this as well as anyone, you could be doing stuff for 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks, and it's not going to manifest itself for 3 years down the line. You mentioned the principles of leadership, which seems to be a good place to go next. And in the interest of not trying to make this a 12 and a half hour conversation, how can we start thinking about some of the principles of leadership very broadly to move towards becoming better leaders?
Yeah, so there's only a few things that I think leaders do on an ongoing basis that are foundational. And this is probably the most evidence-based approach to leadership. You can read 1,000 different leadership books, but they probably go back to a few basic disciplines. And where this research comes from is in all different leadership contexts, when a leader says, I'm really at my best, what are they doing? So I think the first thing that they're doing is they're inspiring a shared vision. So what that means is, where are we going and what's important in this journey? Now, I don't want to go deeper on that shared vision or too much deeper, but that's like, what's our big, hairy, audacious goal? Where are we going to be 10 years from now? What's the Everest that we want to climb? The leader ultimately has to say it. The leader ultimately has to say, we're all bricklayers. We're laying brick every day. But at the end of the day, let's take a step back and understand, what are we building? We are building this cathedral, right? That's vision. Inspire the shared vision. Now, what is that big, hairy, audacious goal? What's it serving? That's our core purpose. What's the purpose of all of this? Our reason for being. In that journey, what are our core values? Core values are just the answer to the question, what do we believe? What are the bedrock beliefs that we're going to use to guide our decision-making going forward? So that is the idea of inspiring a shared vision. And the key terminology there is shared vision, right? It can't just be your vision. You have to get that vision to the point where it is shared by all, not just shared with all, which means, well, I told everybody what my vision was. Shared by all means, as you know, it's not going to be everyone, but the highest percentage of possible, the people on your team and your organization have the same vision that you do. This is the problem we're going to solve. This is the mountain that we're going to climb. These are the values that we hold dear in pursuit of all of that. So that's, I think, the first thing we need to do is inspire the shared vision. And when we're inspiring that shared vision, our real role is probably not just deciding where we're going to go and what's important along the way. We have to constantly remind people. Okay? People don't hear from us. If you as a leader are not sick of saying it, then your constituents, they haven't heard it for the first time. So we want to constantly over communicate that shared vision. Okay? Secondly, I think we need to model the way. Model the way just means you got to set the example. Model the way means you generally have to go first. So we can use all these different ways to explain the idea of modeling the way. Walk the talk would be a powerful one. My favorite one is the room will never do more than you do. So if you're talking about living the core values, okay, one of our core values is learning in our organization. The room's never going to do more than I do. So all of my direct reports, if I want them to learn, I have to understand I better be more of a learner than the rest of them, okay? The room will never do more than you do. So whether it's a value, whether it's how you show up and approach a project or actually approach the work, model the way means model the way around everything in that vision. You have to go first. People are always going to watch what you do rather than listen what you say. So model the way, I think, is the second thing that leaders do when they're really at their best. I think, and there's not very many of these, by the way. I think the third thing that leaders do is they enable others to act. So if you think leadership is about you being brilliant and you being a genius, and we have a name for that, it's called a genius with 1,000 helpers, where you are this brilliant visionary leader, and then you have people to help you. I think that's the wrong approach. When we talk about enable others to act, that means, no, you're creating openings where other people can step into that opening and they can do important work and they can be a part of the vision and they can have a fulfilled career if we're talking about business because you have created an opening. All right. So it's the real work of leadership is not you doing the work. It's you working through other people, and fundamentally we have to create those openings. And there's so many different ways we can do that. One of the ways we can do that is as we grow a firm, as we grow an organization, there's more positions that open. We have so many different personal trainers that work in our organization. We have created openings where people can step into that and they can become masters of their craft and earn a great living and make an incredible impact. Well, of course, we do that in marketing, we do that in finance, and we do that in every aspect of the businesses. We are constantly creating those openings. Okay. I think maybe the most important thing that the leader does is they reward and they recognize. So the favorite terminology for this is they encourage the heart. We have to catch people doing things well, and we have to reward them. And I think the best way to do that is the acronym TSP. We have to be truthful, we have to be specific, and we have to be positive. Now, most leaders and managers that I know, they are truthful and they are positive. They say, hey, Michael, I'm so proud of you. You're doing a great job, right? I was being truthful when I said that. And I'm being very positive. Those are good things, but I need to be specific. I need to talk about what in your performance that I see that is incredibly noteworthy, that I need to call out the beauty of that performance, right? Truth, specificity, and positive is the key. And then the last one, and this is the fifth one, we need to challenge the process. So that means, hey, we've been running things in this department, in this business, the same way for so many years. Are we really asking the question, how can we improve this? Is there a better way to do this? So challenging the process is the idea that we're just not going to accept a status quo on any aspect of the business. We're constantly infusing technology. We're constantly cutting out cost. We're constantly thinking about, we've always done it this way, but is there a different way that we can actually approach it? So challenge the process. And that is it really, really a product of really, really healthy teams where they can have this dialogue and actually attack each other's ideas, not attack each other as people, but attack each other's ideas so that we can have the best ideas that actually win. So those are the 5 big things that I think leaders need to focus on. And here's the reality. You read 1,000 different books on leadership and management. They're really just talking about one of those 5 things. So that's the 30,000-foot view of the 5 things that I think leaders do when they're at their best. And that comes from the work of 2 authors, Kouzes and Posner. And they wrote a book called The Leadership Challenge. And there's been, I don't know, nothing shy of 250 PhD dissertations just on that topic alone. So that frames up our leadership.
Yeah, a lot of gems in there. And certainly some of the books you've mentioned, we're going to link up to these in the show notes page because they are amazing reads. And I think we do a great disservice to our industry when the only books that we read are the fitness books and the journals. Not that those aren't important, but these other books are also critical to the growth and development of our leaders. If I'm sitting here and I'm listening to everything you just said, and I said, wow, this really resonates with me, Luke. Like I hear you, I'm a leader, but that's a lot of stuff, man. Like I've just got to knock back in my chair. How would you advise a leader that's just hearing these things for the first time to begin to approach this shift in their mindset towards some of these principles?
Yeah, I would start with the idea that you have to want to be great. And what you have to want to be great means I want to be great as a leader and manager. I like to think about life's work. Our life's work could be around leadership and management. So it's a mindset that if I got really good at this could be my career. This could be my life's work. I know that my life's work, I mean, I'm passionate about resistance exercise. There's not a week that goes by that I don't read and highlight a journal article about something resistance exercise related. I'm still publishing a tremendous amount of research. I'm into it, but my life's work is leadership and management. So I think your listener can just make that mental shift that could be their life's work. And then number 2, you have to want to be great, means you have to want to study, right? So you got to read the leadership and management books, but it all fits within frameworks. So when you go deeper on some of these topics, keep in mind this simple truth. It does not have to be complicated. Although there are thousands of books written on leadership and management, they're the same tenets and the same principles. So we read those books to get a deeper understanding of one of the tenets and one of the principles, but there is a finite number of tenets and principles, which is why you read a wonderful book on military leadership and you see so many similarities between leadership of a Fortune 100 company. And you see so many similarities in how we lead in sport. The common themes are the same. So constantly remind yourself that it really doesn't have to be complicated. It can be pretty simple. We just have to master a few basic practices or a few basic disciplines. I think that's number two, is you're continually learning, but you're framing it up, understanding that this is not endless. There is not an infinite amount of information. There's just a limited or finite number of core tenets that we really need to understand. I can just go deeper in each one of those as I continue to learn and read. And then the last part is related to that learning and developing, or the learning and development is that's what actually increases your passion. So if I'm talking to someone about the importance of developing healthy teams and how to overcome conflict in teams, that may sound like boring HR stuff. But if I hand you a book or an audio book written by Patrick Lencioni, his best is 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. That's like a 3.5-hour audio book. Man, you're an hour into that book. You're 30 minutes into that book and you can't stop. I mean, you have to continue to listen to that. Your passion for understanding what creates a healthy team just starts to grow. So continue to immerse yourself in learning that's going to drive the passion in all of these different key areas of leadership and management.
Yeah, that makes it a much more approachable, I think, putting it like that. I'm also struck by the fact, Luke, that I feel like our bookshelves look very similar because a number of the books you've mentioned are also books that are on my bookshelf. Earlier, you mentioned the vision, the purpose, and the values. And this is something that is very resonant with me. It's hard to see in my frame here, but behind me on the wall, that is our vision, our mission, and our values on that sign. And these have been critical for my organization, particularly as it's navigated its way through COVID in these difficult times. And I'm sure your vision, your purpose, and your values have been the same. Without getting too into the weeds, talk to our listeners about how they go about the development of those if those don't exist. I know we followed a certain process, but if I'm sitting here and I'm a leader of a fitness facility and I don't have these things, or maybe I have them, because I actually think every business to a degree has them. They're just not codified and shared. How do you go about thinking of putting these things in place?
Great question. And I agree with you mostly on that. Some of them, if you haven't answered the question, it's still there. You just have to codify it, or I like to say unearth it. So a great example of that is core values. So you should not manufacture core values. You should not look at another firm or another leader and say, what are their core values? We'll adopt them. Instead, you have to start by asking yourself, well, what do I believe, right? If it's just you, if you're the founder, you should say, what do I believe? I want to build this firm around my core beliefs. So a full 2 years before Discover Strength was ever opened, I identified what our 4 core values were. I'm the founder, and I said, I want to build a company around these 4 core values. And I'll just be very, very transparent when we're hiring people. Hey, these are the 4 things we believe. If you believe what we believe, you should come work with us. If you don't believe in these things, you shouldn't come work with us. So we wanted to build the firm around those values. So I think we have to unearth values. Now, if the firm's existed for so many years and maybe you're not the founder and you still have to decide what the core values are, then go through the exercise of picking 3 or 4 of your top performers, the people that are great cultural fits. Man, if you could replicate them, reproduce the same human over and over and over again, you could accomplish anything as an organization, as a team. Get those people's names on paper and then start using the attributes, articulating the attributes, the values that we see in those people. That's where your kind of word bank of potential core values are going to come from. And then my final piece of advice here on the core values is less is more. You don't want 10, you don't want 12, in my opinion, because then you're starting to describe all of the virtues that we want to see in the perfect human being, right? We want like 3 to 5 core values. And this is a key point. There's no evidence that picking the right core values will allow you to be more successful than another firm. However, hiring and being able to retain a team of people that believe in the same core values, well, that's the number one predictor of long-term profitable growth. So we want people that believe in the same things. It just turns out it doesn't matter what they believe in, which is why like Chick-fil-A's core values can be very different than Amazon. They're both wonderful companies. What you have to decide as an individual employee is, well, which organization's values align with my values? So that's how I think we approach values. Now, the long-term goal, I'm calling it a big, hairy, audacious goal, that is generally not unearthed. You have to sit down as a team, and maybe you have 4 people in your entire business. Maybe you have 50 people in your business, and you're only doing this with maybe a leadership team. I've done this with all of my employees, which at the time was 2 other people. I've also done it kind of in the modern era with just my leadership team. And we just ask the question, where do we want to be 10 years from now? Think about this as a directional goal. Okay, what direction are we headed in? What do we want to accomplish? So we're thinking about this in terms of what's the Everest that we want to climb? What's the cathedral that we want to build? When you do this, it's got to be measurable. You can't say we want to be the best fitness company in whatever, right? You can't measure best, right? So it's got to be measurable. So one of the keys here, I think, is to use revenue. Revenue is not the only thing that matters, but it's a universal language for measuring how large an organization is. So many companies will use the measurability of revenue as part of their BHAG. I think that's important. So for us, we know we want to have $100 million in revenue in 100 locations by the end of 2025. So that's measurable, meaning when we get to the end of 2025, we can count that we have 100 locations and we have $100 million in revenue. The other key for this big, hairy, audacious goal is, as a leader, it cannot just be meaningful to you. It's got to be a BHAG that inspires the entire organization. People have to say, yeah, it's worth it for me to lay bricks toward building that cathedral. And you have to be able to inspire your team around, why is it worth it for us to go there and to build this? John F. Kennedy did it, like we said, when he said, we're going to put a man on the moon. Here's why it's worth it for us to do that. And of course, he said that in 1961, and we did it in 1969. He wasn't alive to see it, but we did it. So wherever you're deciding where we're going to go, it has to be meaningful to the entire organization. So it can't be a BHAG can't be like creating shareholder value or how much money you want to make. It's got to be about the entire organization. And then we'll take one other step and talk about the purpose of the organization. So the purpose, the core purpose, is really the organization's reason for being. Generally, it has nothing to do with the technical work that you do. So when I say reason for being, a great example is Disney as a company. Disney has theme parks, they have animation, they own ABC and ESPN, they have cruise ships, they own the Star Wars franchise, streaming services on TV, Disney Plus. They are making money in a lot of different ways. Their core purpose, their reason for being, is 3 words: make people happy. So the BHAG that they set, the goal that they set, just has to serve that reason for being, that core purpose. So when you think about your core purpose, don't think about the technical work that you do. Think about, what is our reason for being? When we set these big, hairy, audacious goals, the big, hairy, audacious goal is just going to serve this overarching purpose that we're never going to actually achieve, but it is our reason for being. It's the just cause that's worth fighting for, and we want to continue to perpetuate that cause. So our reason for being, our core purpose, is what we call leading a movement in evidence-based exercise. That just means everyone we hire wants to contribute toward a connection between the scientific research and how humans actually work out. Scientific research is awesome, but if we just study motor units and muscle fibers and it doesn't trickle down and actually impact how humans exercise, this is all for naught, right? We can't do this in a vacuum. Now, more and more people exercising and going to health clubs and going to gyms, this is not meaningless, but it's not as meaningful as it could be if it's not connected to this. So our core purpose is to lead a movement in evidence-based exercise, which just means we want to spend our entire professional life connecting these two. Now, the key to the core purpose is it has to inspire, it has to speak to everybody in the organization. If I'm going to apply for a job with you and you tell me what your core purpose is, and that purpose is not one of my own purposes in my own life, it doesn't work. Because we all want to work someplace where there's this purpose alignment, where we're truly doing missional work. My own purpose, my cause, my passion in my own life is aligned with what this company is. That's more powerful than charity or philanthropy or nonprofit work. I mean, that is missional work. And I think ultimately that's what we all want to be a part of. So when you pick a core purpose, the reason for being, just make sure it's also the reason for being, or it could be the reason for being, of one of the front line that you're going to hire.
Yeah, and that sums up exactly what I was hoping to get at with that. But to even go a step further, and I think I can abstract it out of everything you said, these are not just things that go on your wall. Like, yes, I have this on my wall. A lot of companies have these things on their walls. It sounds like you are literally using these operationally in the hiring process, in probably sadly, in some cases, the firing process, the promotion process. Like, this is an operational tool for you. This just isn't a slogan on the wall.
Absolutely. So we have to, as a leader and manager, we have to act with the greater good. So the greater good is the answer to all these questions. What's our BHAG? What's our core purpose? What are our core values? These things become a filter for how we show up, how we behave, the decisions we make, our strategy, all of that. And so I mean, there's not a week of the year that I'm not on a plane somewhere speaking to a group of executives in all different industries. And I'll talk about, for example, I'll talk about core values. And, every time I speak, someone says, well, we have core values, we're good there. And I say, okay, you want to share what your core values are? And of course they say, I don't know, or let me look in my phone and I'll tell you. And the answer is, if you don't know what the core values are, then by definition, you don't have core values. Frankly, if your frontline staff member doesn't know what the core values are, then by definition, you don't have core values. So it has to be, you just nailed it. It has to be interwoven into everything that we do.
Yeah. And so important. I think sometimes, and not that the technical elements of our business aren't important. I'm very evidence-based, much like you, and I value evidence-based practitioners, but you could be the most brilliant evidence-based practitioner, but if you don't align with our values, if our purpose and our vision doesn't resonate with you, you can be great. You just can't be great here. And that's actually not just okay. That's better for both of us.
Yeah, it's incredibly healthy. Yep, incredibly healthy.
As we come to a close here, there's a couple more things that I just kind of want to get your thoughts on. And this next one, I think, is because of your view of the fitness and wellness ecosystem. We're sitting here, we're coming out of COVID. Well, I don't even know if we're coming out of COVID. We're still in the midst of it. Our industry has been hit hard, Luke. We all know the statistics, which at this point I don't even like to say anymore because they're so downtrodden. What are you seeing, though, in all of your travels and all your interactions that gives you hope for our industry in the future?
Yeah, so I think we have so many reasons to be hopeful. I think the role of the fitness professional as a key component of the allied healthcare continuum is only going to become increasingly important. I don't think we have had a significant role on the allied healthcare continuum. And who's on that continuum? I don't know. Nurses and registered nurses and physicians and physician's assistants and physical therapists. And well, where does the exercise physiologist, where's the personal trainer fit? And I have a belief, and I think it's becoming an evidence-based notion that the fitness professional has a more significant influence on public health than the rest of that continuum. And so I think COVID maybe sets a stage. Like, I think that's what the future looks like. We are setting a stage of understanding that the fitness professional can really be a significant part of this allied healthcare continuum. Now, along with that, I think we need to heighten the importance of the fitness professional and their expertise over the physical plant. So what we saw with COVID is, well, health club members and health clubs really suffered. Health clubs suffered because when COVID shut down a health club, the doors closed. And the members said, well, I no longer have anything to do with this business because this business was always four walls and a collection of equipment. Where I just think about my sister-in-law, who's a physician, right? When COVID hit, her work didn't stop because she wasn't looked at as a physical clinic. She was looked at as an expert. And she still had that expertise. She could still provide that expertise. So in our industry, we've made the mistake of selling four walls and a collection of equipment that happens to have fitness professionals in it. Instead, I think we have to think about it as we're service providers. We are expert, educated professionals that it doesn't matter what context, what delivery mechanism, what the conduit is, we can still provide value. So, and I don't think we're going to have closed fitness facilities on an ongoing basis. So maybe that won't be germane going forward, but that's got to be the mindset. what is your positioning? Your positioning is we're selling the expertise of the trainer, not access to equipment and not access to four walls. I think we have an increased awareness from the consumer that ultimately the government's not going to take care of them. Their physician, the healthcare system is not going to take care of them. You have a personal responsibility to be an advocate for your own health and wellness and fitness. All of those are different. They all matter. And we've been powerfully reminded of that. So I think that will be a macro trend of the future. And my goodness, if you're a fitness professional listening to this, that positions you to be just in a great spot as we move forward. So a great spot to produce value. Like we said before, producing value means monetizing, making money, creating impact, all of it. So I think we have just a tremendous upside on what we see in the near and longer term future in our industry.
Yeah, and we're gonna pin that very salient explanation right there, because I couldn't agree more with that, and it will actually lead us into our final question of the interview. But before we get to that, could you tell our audience where they can go to find out more about you and all the things you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. They can go to discoverstrength.com. So that's our website. They can check out everything we're doing. You can follow me on my own social. It's Luke Carlson 3070 on Instagram is probably where I'm the most active. And of course, anybody can email me at luke@discoverstrength.com.
Awesome. And we'll link up to all of that on the show notes page. And I will say, you and your team have been very accommodating to me reaching out and being a guest on here. And I think that anyone that would reach out to you would find exactly the same thing. So I definitely appreciate that. Well, the last question gets back to what you were talking about a moment ago, because I have a very similar vision for where our industry is going, but we're not there yet. And this wellness paradox is, I framed it up as just this gap in trust, interaction, and communication between allied health and medical professionals and fitness and wellness professionals. If you had to give the fitness and wellness professionals listening one actionable piece of advice to take away to close off that gap, what would it be?
Wow, what a great question. What a great question. So I think it has to be, in my opinion, is we have to lead from an evidence-based foundation. And a lot of times we like to use the terminology evidence-based, but so let's say evidence-based, but it means thinking like a scientist as well, which has probably more to do with our ego than anything else. So thinking like a scientist means, if I'm certain of something, if I have this idea, it can't become my religion. It has to stay as my hypothesis, which means if it's proven wrong, if there's new evidence and this is no longer, correct or accurate or the best evidence that we have, I can quickly abandon it and move on to new ideas. So I think we have to think like a scientist. And I think we have to lead with this evidence-based approach, which means we have to have an understanding of what the preponderance of scientific research says around two things. Number one, benefits. I like to say we are in a society that is largely pro-exercise. We just don't have a clue what exercise actually does. Okay, I would say the vast majority of exercise professionals I've met don't know what the actual evidence-based benefits of exercise are. I think most of us are exercising for reasons that are not even the most profound reasons. So number one, we need to have an evidence-based understanding of why exercise is good for us and exactly what to expect. And number two, we need to understand an evidence-based approach to the interventions that drive those outcomes. So and this is what makes reading the research so great. We get to read research on how to do it. We get to read research on what are the outcomes. And those are totally different topics and they're both fascinating, but we have to have an evidence-based approach in our understanding around both of those. And we have to understand, I think this is the key point. We have to show up. We have to step into that position as being the resource on exercise. I like to think about this all the time. What's the top of the food chain in medicine, right? So I'm going to go through that chain again. It's an LPN, it's a registered nurse, it's a nurse practitioner. Maybe nurse practitioner and physician's assistant are tied. That's a debate. Then it's the physician is the top of that food chain. So if you go into law, right, it's some type of a legal assistant, and eventually the top of that food chain is the attorney. Okay, maybe it's a judge, similar. What's the top of the food chain in exercise? Well, I got news for you. It's the personal trainer. It's the certified personal trainer, certified exercise physiologist. We have to step up and own that and say, well, no one should have more expertise around exercise and fitness than we do. My goodness, you should never defer to a physical therapist and listen to a physical therapist. You should never listen to a physician on exercise. We have to step up and say, we're not passionate about exercise alone. We're actually knowledgeable about exercise. When's the last time you chose an attorney because they were passionate about the law? You chose the attorney because they actually had a body of knowledge. And I think we have to continue to push to acquire and build that body of knowledge and say, we should be the resource for all things exercise and fitness.
Love it. Luke, very, very inspiring. Great knowledge that you dropped today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it was my pleasure, Michael. Thanks for having me, and congratulations on what you're doing and what you're building. What a phenomenal resource. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Luke as much as I did. If you found it insightful and valuable, please share with your friends and colleagues. Any additional information that we'd like to share from this episode with you can be found on the show notes page by going to wellnessparadoxpod.com/episode 34. Please be on the lookout for next week's episode when it drops on Wednesday. And if you have a moment, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. Those reviews can make a massive difference for us. Happy New Year to all of you. And until we chat again next week, please be well.